The first step is to choose where your EV charger is going to be located. Obviously, you want it to be able to reach the car when you're parked, but additionally, the further it is from the panel or sub-panel, the more expensive it will be. Mine conveniently is just going to go right here where the red circle is, and there's my main panel right there, so that should be easy. The goal of this video is to help you understand and properly size your EV charging needs. So what does your daily commute look like? How fast do you need to charge? These are the important questions. For reference, a standard outlet gives you 2 to 3 miles per hour with the Tesla mobile charger, but most people want to go faster. Assuming that you do want to go faster, the first step is to open your electrical panel by pulling the latch to the middle of the panel and looking at it. It should look something like this with, breakers, both single and double pole, and labels. In this case, a single pole is the left side and a double pole is the right side. That will matter. So the way that your electrical panel works is power will come in and power one leg or bus bar of your panel. So the black comes in and powers the black side, and the red comes in and powers the red side. When you have a single pole breaker, you are getting 120 volts times the breaker size. When you have a double pole breaker, you're getting 240 volts times the breaker size. So looking at my personal breaker, there's the air conditioner, which is a double pole breaker, and the water heater, which is also a double pole breaker. So both of them are getting 240 volts. The disposal and the dishwasher are both getting 120 volts each because they are both single pole breakers. Now, I understand what you're asking. What does this mean for my EV charging? Well, what you're going to have to do is look at your panel and do a little bit of rough math to determine how much amperage you have available to add an EV charger. Just a disclaimer, I'm not an electrician. If you want a detailed calculation, you should hire a true electrician to do that math for you. But basically, they're going to do it in 3 steps: the square footage of the home, the big ticket items, and the secured appliances. And each of those have accepted values per National Electrical Code. The first step is just to understand general use, so lights, things like that. You take the square footage of your home, in this case 2,000, and you multiply it by 3 volt amps per square foot, totaling 6,000 for me. However, the way that the calculation is done is the first 3,000 you count at 100%, and the next 3,000 you count at 35%. So for my 2,000 square foot home, I get 4,050 volt amps of general use. The next step is to look at your big ticket items. Generally, these are almost all 240 volts in your breaker, so look for your double panels. A laundry circuit costs 1,500 volt amps, and that's per electrical code. An electric range, you can multiply the breaker size by the voltage, in this case 50 by 240. It comes out to 1,200 volt amps, but electrical code will let you take 2/3 of that, so in this case 8,000. Next, I have heating and air conditioning. You want to take 100% load for each of those and then count whichever is greater because your heat and AC is not going to be on at the same time. So in my case, the air conditioner is greater at 8,400 volt amps. The last big ticket item is the clothes dryer, which is set at 5,000 volt amps per National Electrical Code. So we did general use and we did our big ticket items. Now what we're going to do is secured appliances. So hot water heater, dishwasher, garbage disposal, microwave, fridge. All of these count at 75% of their output. So the hot water heater is a 30 amp breaker, 240 volts, times 75 only counts for 5,400 volt amps. And then the other smaller appliances that I have, dishwasher, garbage disposal, microwave, fridge, are all 15 amps at 120 volts, so they each count for 1,350 volt amps. All right, so after all that math, what we have now is a total volt amp calculation for our house. In this case, 37,750. Divide that by 240, and you see the total amp demand of 157, leaving us 42 or 43 if you round up total amps available. So we cannot put a 50 or 60 amp breaker in for our EV charger. Since an EV charger counts as an 100% load, the largest that we could put in here is a 40 amp breaker for our EV charger. So now it's time to pick an amperage that you'd like to charge at. Remember that you don't necessarily want to go all the way up to this calculated load because it's a rough load, but here's approximately the charge speed with the Tesla 3 wall connector. So in our fake scenario, we'll assume our math is perfect and we'll select a 40 amp breaker, which allows us to charge at 80% or 32 amps of that breaker size. This also will keep things pretty cheap for the next step, as we'll see. Once you've selected the amperage that you're going to use, you need to select the wire gauge or thickness to carry that load. The thicker the wire, the lower the gauge. It's really stupid. So, 10 gauge is thicker and more expensive than 14 gauge. So you need to use a chart like this to determine the size wire that you need. And remember, you will likely need 3 or 4 wires depending on your EV charger. There's also a link below. But for instance, if we had to run it 20 feet at 40 amps, we would be using 6 gauge wire, which is $1.42 per square foot. Not terrible. But if we had to run it 60 feet, we'd have to use 1 gauge wire, which is $5.33 a square foot. And as you can see, copper wire is expensive. That's the difference between $85 in wire cost and $959 in wire cost. But here's an example of how you can start to make those trade-offs for your own system. For instance, let's say you have to go 60 feet. Well, if you choose 30 amps, you go down to 2 gauge wire. 2 gauge wire is only $368 a square foot, so you suddenly save yourself about $300 in wiring if you don't mind charging a little slower. If you've gotten this far, you should have done a rough load calculation, determined the location for your EV charger, determined the breaker size for your EV charger, and then determine the wire gauge needed. At this point, you have a really good estimate whether you're going to do it yourself or if you're going to have an electrician come out of what it should actually cost. That said, the next video that I'll publish will be my DIY, so please subscribe if you want to DIY it as well.